Elena Marsh had small hands. She always noticed this about herself whenever she held a patient's hand, how her fingers looked so thin and pale against someone else's skin. She had been a nurse for 4 years, and in those 4 years, she had learned that small hands could still do very large things. She worked the night shift at a small hospital near the edge of a forest town called Ridgemont. Most people in Ridgemont did not talk about the forest. They did not walk in it after dark. They did not ask questions about what lived beyond the ridge. They simply turned their eyes away from the tree line the way people turn their eyes away from things they are not sure they can handle. Elena had always been practical. She had no time for fear, not since her mother got sick 3 years ago, and Elena moved to Ridgemont to take care of her. Not since her mother passed 18 months later, and Elena stayed because she had nowhere else to go, and because the hospital needed her. She ate her meals alone. She watered a small plant on her windowsill every morning. She did her job carefully, and without complaint. The only thing unusual about Elena, the only thing she could not explain or choose to do, was the lullaby. She did not know where it came from. She could not remember learning it. It had simply always been there, the way breathing was always there, a quiet melody that lived in the back of her throat, and came out when she was tired, or nervous, or sad. Her mother used to hum it too. Her grandmother said the song came from a woman who stayed with the family one winter, long ago, and left it behind like a gift. Elena hummed it without thinking. On her break, sitting on the back steps of the hospital near the woods, eating a cold sandwich, she would hum it softly into the dark and cold air. She did not know anyone was listening. Calum Ashvale had ruled the Northern Packs for 11 years. He was tall, the kind of tall that made rooms feel smaller when he walked into them. He had gray eyes the color of winter sky, and a voice that did not need to be raised to be heard across a crowd. His pack respected him. Other packs feared him. He made decisions without hesitation, settled disputes without emotion, and led hunts with the kind of quiet skill that looked easy and was not. But something was wrong with him. Not wrong in a way that could be seen. He ate well, he slept, he did his work. But 7 years ago, on a night in early spring, his mate Sarah had died. Their son had followed within hours. Calum had buried them under an oak tree on the eastern hill, and he had not cried since. He had not spoken their names since. He had simply closed a door inside himself and turned the lock. His wolf, a huge silver animal named Ash, who lived in the deeper part of him the way all wolves lived in their human hosts, had gone completely silent. Wolves were not meant to be silent. They sang to the moon at ceremonies. They howled at the birth of new pack children. They communicated in small ways throughout every day, a warmth behind the ribs when something was right, a tension in the chest when something was wrong. Ash did none of this. He lay down somewhere inside Calum and did not move, did not react, did not respond to anything. The pack elder, an old woman named Rova, who had known 3 alpha kings and outlived 2 of them, spoke to Calum about it once. Ash is not dying, she said. He is waiting. Waiting for what? Calum had asked. Something only he can hear, she said. He will know it when it comes. Calum had nodded politely, the way he nodded at things he did not believe, and then he had gone back to his work. He ran border patrol alone, in wolf form, on Thursday nights. It was the one thing he allowed himself that was purely for Ash, the movement, the cold air, the feel of the ground. Even if Ash could not respond, Calum kept offering. He thought it was the least he could do. On a moonless Thursday in late October, he was running the eastern boundary when he heard it. He stopped. It was barely there, carried on cold air from the direction of the human settlement, a small hospital, lights visible through the trees, a melody, low and wandering, the way water wanders over stones. It had no beginning that he could hear. It did not feel like a performance. It felt like something a person did alone when they thought no one was listening. Inside Calum, Ash moved. It was the first time in 7 years. Not a full movement, not a lunge or a cry, just a shift, the way a sleeping person shifts when something warm touches their hand. A small, involuntary turning toward something. Calum stood absolutely still at the tree line, breathing quietly, listening. The melody continued for another minute and then stopped. A door closed somewhere in the lit building. The night went ordinary again. But Ash was trembling. Calum went back the next night, and the next. He told himself it was a security matter, a human too close to the boundary, a potential problem to assess. He sent his second-in-command, a steady man named Marcus, to find out who worked the night shift at the hospital. Marcus came back with a thin file. A nurse named Elena Marsh. No PAC connections. No known family in the area. Moved to Ridgemont to care for a sick parent. Stayed after the parent passed. Lived alone in a small apartment on the north side of town. No complaints from neighbors. No trouble of any kind. Calum looked at the file for a long time. Then he told Marcus to forget he had pulled it. He kept going to the tree line on Thursday nights. Then on other nights too. Elena was not always on break at the same time. Sometimes he stood in the dark for an hour and did not hear anything. Sometimes she came out within minutes, sat on the cold concrete steps, and hummed while she ate. Every time she hummed, Ash turned toward the sound. Calum had lived in his body for 34 years. He knew exactly how Ash felt when something mattered. A deep, slow pressure in the chest, like a tide coming in. He had not felt it in 7 years. He felt it now, standing in the dark between the trees, listening to a woman he had never spoken to, hum a melody he had never heard. He was frightened by it. He was also honest enough to admit that he had not been frightened by anything in a very long time, and that this frightened him too. The situation resolved itself, or rather, forced itself, on a cold night in November. A young pack wolf named Dren was hit by a car near the hospital road. He was 21 years old and not yet fully trained in managing his shift under stress. He dragged himself, badly injured and partially changed, into the hospital parking lot and lost consciousness there. Elena found him. She came around the corner of the building at the end of her shift and nearly walked into him. She stopped. She looked at him for a moment. The strange proportions, the injuries that did not quite make sense for a car accident, the way his hands looked wrong in the light. She did not run. She did not call for security. She knelt down next to him and pressed 2 fingers to his throat to check his pulse, and in that moment of focused calm, she began to hum, the lullaby, quiet and automatic, just a few bars. Just the way she always did when she needed to steady herself. The young wolf's breathing changed. He stopped shaking. His body, which had been fighting itself between 2 forms, seemed to ease back into one. He became more still, more human, and began to breathe normally. Elena called for a stretcher. Calum arrived 40 minutes later. He walked into the hospital and presented himself as the young man's uncle, which was thin enough as a story that Elena simply did not bother to challenge it. She led him to the room where Dren was resting, gave a brief, efficient account of what she had found and what had been done for him, and then stood with her arms folded and looked directly at Calum. "He's going to be fine," she said, "whatever he is." It was not an accusation. It was not said with fear. It was said the way she might say it about an unusual test result, a fact placed on the table, open to discussion. Calum looked at her. In the direct light of the hospital, she was smaller than he expected, and calmer than she had any right to be. She had shadows under her eyes from a long shift. Her hair was pulled back. She looked at him without flinching. Inside Calum, Ash pressed forward like a man pressing his hand to a warm window in winter. "You are not frightened," Calum said. "I've been frightened," Elena said. "I just don't find it very useful." They spoke for a long time that night. Calum told her enough. Not everything, but enough to be honest. The territory, the pack, the boundary behind her hospital, and the fact that she had been safe there because he had been watching. He told her in plain words because she asked plain questions, and he found that he could not offer her anything less than plainness. She listened the way she did everything, carefully, without performance, with the occasional question that landed exactly where it needed to. At the end, she looked at him and said, "Why are you telling me this? You didn't have to." He had no answer he could give her yet. He did not fully understand it himself, so he said nothing, and she accepted that, with the same quiet patience she seemed to apply to most things. A few days later, she told him about the lullaby. She had asked her grandmother where the song came from, really came from, all the way back. Her grandmother had been quiet for a moment, the way old people are quiet when a question reaches somewhere unexpected. Then she told Elena what she knew. that the melody had been taught to Elena's great-great-grandmother by a woman who sheltered with the family during a hard winter. The woman never said who she was or where she came from. She left in the spring. But before she left, she gave them the song and told them it was for quieting frightened things. Calum sat with that for a long time. Then he said, quietly, "My wolf recognizes that melody." He did not explain more than that. He did not have to. He watched Elena understand. Not everything, but enough. He watched her look at him with the careful attention she gave everything, and then she did what he had not expected. She hummed it. Not for him exactly, not as a performance. Just the way she always did it, low and easy, a few bars, like something that came naturally when words ran out. And Ash, for the first time in 7 years, lifted his head. 3 weeks later, the pack gathered for the winter ceremony. It was the ceremony Ash had been silent through for 7 years. The pack came together under the open sky, and they sang to the moon, voices rising one by one, a sound that built the way all natural things build, from small to large, from simple to full. Calum stood at the front, as he always did. He expected nothing. He had trained himself, very carefully, not to expect things. But he closed his eyes, and he thought of the melody, not because he tried to, but because it was simply there now, the way things you have heard many times in a short time become part of you. He heard it in his memory, low and wandering, without beginning. Ash rose. It was not dramatic. It was quiet, the way real things are often quiet. A slow, deep movement from somewhere inside him, like a tide coming all the way in, like something that had been held underwater finally being allowed to surface. And then the sound came. Calum did not choose it. He did not prepare for it. His wolf simply opened his throat to the cold sky and sang. The ceremony fell silent around him. And then the old ones began to cry, not out of sadness, but out of the specific feeling people have when something they had given up on comes back. The warriors were next. Then, everyone. Rova put her hand over her mouth and did not move for a long time. Marcus turned away. Calum stood in the middle of it all and let it happen. He went to her after. He was still in his formal clothes, too fine for a hospital parking lot, when he found her at the end of her shift, keys in hand, under the cold lights of the lot. She looked at him once and knew something had shifted. "My wolf sang tonight," he said, "for the first time in 7 years." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Was it good?" "It was the best thing I have felt in 7 years," he said, "and I am not sure yet how to carry it." She looked at him for a long moment, this large, careful man standing under hospital lights in the November cold, looking at her like something he had found after believing it was gone forever. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said. She did not promise more than that, neither did he. They were both too honest and too careful for promises they could not yet keep. She turned toward her car, and then, without thinking, the way she always did it, without thinking, she hummed 3 soft bars of the melody as she walked away. He stood in the cold and listened until her car turned out of the lot and the sound was gone. Inside him, Ash settled into a quiet that was nothing like the silence of the last 7 years. This was the quiet of something finally at rest, something that had waited a very long time and had now found the thing it was waiting for. Elena had never believed she was someone who could reach the unreachable. She was a woman who ate cold sandwiches on concrete steps and watered a plant every morning and worked long nights in a small hospital at the edge of a forest she had never entered. But she had carried a song without knowing what it was for. And it turned out, that had been exactly enough.